Good morning. My name is John Talk. I'm privileged to be the rector here at Emmanuel Episcopal Church in Southern Pines, North Carolina. And whether you are joining us here in Moore County or for somewhere around the world, I want to say thank you for joining us this Wednesday morning to talk a little bit about the Beatitudes. As you know, we're doing a little bit of a series on the Beatitudes, which are part of Jesus' larger Sermon on the Mount, which found in Matthew is towards the very beginning of Matthew's recitation of the story of Jesus. In fact, you could argue that the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes as the focus of the Sermon on the Mount are indeed that aspect of Jesus' words, at least, which set up the rest of his ministry. Now, we've been together for a few weeks now, and we're at the third, or depending on your point of view, the second of the Beatitudes. I'm going to read it to you first from the New Jerusalem Bible, and then second from the Bible that we use in worship, the New Revised Standard Version, which is a descendant of the King James Version of the Bible. First, the New Jerusalem Bible. And you'll see that it's a little bit different than what we use in church on Sunday morning. I do like this translation, but, well, you'll see. Happy the gentle. They shall have the earth for their heritage. Now, the New Revised Standard Version. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, meek and gentle, and even perhaps the word humble, are all sort of related to each other in our minds. And for me, when I hear gentle, I think of someone gently holding newly plucked eggs. Or meekness, I might think of a rabbit hiding in her burrow. Or perhaps humbleness, someone who is afraid to speak truth in their settings. And I don't think, or in fact I know, that Jesus never calls on us to be afraid to speak truth. In fact, Jesus sends us into the world to spread the good news of him and God's love and forgiveness. Jesus doesn't call on us to hide in our burrows, hiding from the wider world, from the dangers of this world. Rather, Jesus sends us into the world in boldness. Jesus doesn't call on us to treat the gospel, at least, as if it is a fragile thing, but rather as if it were robust and strong and ready to be spread throughout this great world of ours. So what might it mean to be meek? What might it mean to be humble? What might it mean to be gentle in this passage? I don't know if you've ever held a newborn baby. I know that for me, when I see someone who is confident holding the baby with strength, with, I don't want to say verve, but with confidence, with experience, they hold the child gently. They hold the child stilly. They hold the child with strength, not crushing, but with strength. Whereas if you put a baby child into perhaps a 4 or 5-year-old's arms, everyone in the room goes, ready to pounce in case there's an emergency, because they don't have the experience, they don't have the strength, they don't have the confidence to be gentle. They don't have the ability to be meek. I also wonder if there is part of that meekness, of that gentleness, of that humbleness that tells us that we can't rely on ourselves, on our own strength, on our own courage, or on our own intellect, on our own gifts, but rather have to lean entirely on God and to take God's strength, to take God's courage, to take God's intellect, God's ideas into this world instead of our own. And as we look at the rest of the New Testament, I think that there's something to be said for both of these things. You know, after all, where do we see Jesus exhibiting meekness? Where do we see Jesus exhibiting humbleness? Where do we see Jesus exhibiting gentleness? Perhaps it's when he prays what we now call the Lord's Prayer. Give us this day our daily needs, our daily bread. That is, we rely on God to give us what we need to do God's work today. We don't need God to give us what we need to do God's work tomorrow, today. We can't save it up like manna in the wilderness. Rather, we need God's gentleness, God's love, God's strength, God's courage today to be Christians today. Likewise, we see in the Psalms, especially Psalm 37, that we're called to trust in the Lord, to trust in the Lord, to lean on God, to be dependent on God, to do the work of God, the Psalm says. And when we do that, we shall inherit the land. We shall inherit the land. Or as Jesus says, we shall inherit the earth. Does that mean that we inherit the earth to do what we want? No. Rather, we inherit the earth to live as God's children. Does that mean that these trees that I'm seeing outside our window are ours for the cutting? Not unless they build God's kingdom. That the animals on our farm are there for our pleasure? Not unless they build God's kingdom. That each other human beings are there for us to use? No. Not unless they build God's kingdom. So my prayer for all of us this week is that we'll have an opportunity to examine our interactions with each other, especially, whether it's when we're ordering coffee, or at the doctor's office, or at work with a coworker, or across the dinner table with a spouse, or on the phone with a child, that whenever we have a human interaction, that we're able then to say, how does God's strength give me gentleness? How does God's courage give me meekness? How does God's boldness give me the opportunity to be humble? And if I can bring meekness and gentleness and humbleness into relationship with my child, with my spouse, with my coworkers, with all of those whom I love or know or interact with, how has the world changed? So meditate on that this week. Perhaps journal on that this week. If you want to send an email to me talking about how that works in your life, it's super easy to do. Just simply send a note to eec@emmanuel-parish.org or give me a call and we'll have a chat. Thank you for your time this morning. I ask God's blessing upon each and every one of you. I'm looking forward to seeing you Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. Goodbye.